Hello everyone, I welcome you all to a new video by MedGRADiENT. I welcome you all to our YouTube channel. In this video we will be discussing about the anatomy of the heart, and we've already discussed about the histology of the heart in the previous video. The link to this video will be put up in the description. We will also have video on the dissection of the heart, the dissection of the real heart, and this is solely intended for learning purposes, and the heart that we have used in the video of dissection is just a byproduct of the meat industry, and it was just used for the learning purposes, right? So before going to the video of dissection, a student should see this video where we discuss about the structures of the heart, the theoretical part, so that you have a clear picture of what you should expect when you have the real organ, right? So directly let's get into the video of anatomy of the heart. Now this is the structure that we see externally and in most of the textbooks, may it be in the atlases, may it be in the simple anatomy textbooks, may it be in the review books. This image is to be found everywhere. So what are the things that we need to know as soon as we have this picture? Now here I want you to understand is that the picture is given without label for a purpose, and the purpose of giving this image in such a way is that you have to learn something called as orientation, right? Orientation. Now what is orientation? Orientation means that you have to orient yourself for the given image. Now what is actually meant by orientation, right? So I want you to understand that when you are given with a specimen, you do not know what part of that specimen is anterior, what part of that specimen is posterior. What you know is just that you have the specimen, and the teacher will ask you about the specimen, right? So it is your responsibility to locate the structures given in the specimen. For example, just look in the screen, right? So the part over here, this part, right, this part is called as anterior interventricular sulcus, right? Anterior interventricular sulcus. Now why is it called anterior? Because this part of the heart is anterior, right? Interventricular because it is between two ventricles, and sulcus because it is a depression. Now, and you've got artery, vein passing through it, not passing through it, but they are lying in it, right? So for such a discussion you need to orient yourself, like which part of the organ is anterior, which part of the organ is posterior, right? So with my experience I have just planned to explain six structures that you need to remember. And with respect to these six structures, if you know the six structures exactly, to locate six structures, in the end, even if you know one structure, you will be able to locate the other five structures externally, right? Other five structures. Now what I want you to understand is, it is important for you to memorize at least these six structures, right? At least these six structures. So let's know what these six structures are. First, what is the base of the heart, right? Base of the heart. Now base is something which has attachment lower, which has its attachment lower respect to the other organs, right? Now what is lower? I mean, in it, a base has always to be inferior. Now what I want you to understand, let's say we've got a bowl, right? For this bowl, and this is a table, right? This is a table. Now if this bowl sits on this table, now we call this part of the bowl to be the base, right? I think I'm not a very good artist. Let me try again. We have this bowl, right? And I'm trying to draw a table. Yes. Now, if this bowl sits on this table, that means this part of the bowl is called as a base, right? So when we compare this bowl to our heart, where exactly should be the base? Is it over here? No, you're wrong, right? Why? Because when we actually have the specimen, that is our heart, put on the diaphragm, that is where it rests on, the base actually is over here, right? Let me make it black. This part of the heart is called base. Now why? Because when we have our diaphragm, right, we have our heart resting on diaphragm like this, and the base, the part of the heart that is attached to the diaphragm, is over here. So this part of the heart is called as the base. So what is this part called? This part is called as the apex. What is it called? The apex. So we have got 1 and 2, right? So this is 1 and this is 2. Now I told you we need to locate 6 structures, right? 6 structures. So the first one is base, the second one is apex. So how do you remember? The base in the structure is near to all the vessels that we can see, and the apex is the pointed structure that we see over here. This is our apex and this is our base, right? So the apex is the pointed stuff in the heart, which is inferior to the base, of course, in the image. Now what is the third structure? The third structure that I want you to remember is very easy to locate, and that is this, the arc of aorta, or simply aorta, right? Okay, now what is the fourth structure? The fourth structure lies just below it, and it's called what? Any guesses? Yes, it's called the pulmonary trunk. Pulmonary trunk. Now out of 6 we've already discussed 1, 2, 3 and 4, right? Now we need to find 2 more. So 2 more structures that are clearly visible are another 2 structures that are a pair of arteries and a pair of veins. Now wait, arteries and veins, instead of putting it as arteries and veins, I would say that the rest 2 structures are all veins. Irrespective of what they carry, they are all veins. So let us find out. So the first is this structure over here. So this is the 5th structure, right? 5th structure, and that is our Vena Cava, right? And Vena Cava, it has got a superior Vena Cava and an inferior Vena Cava. The superior Vena Cava and inferior Vena Cava, right? Now, but when we speak about the 6th structure, the 6th structure are very small. They are here and they are here. So they are called, any guesses? They are called as pulmonary veins, right? Pulmonary veins, they carry oxygenated blood into the heart. Okay, so the 6 structures that I want you guys to recognize are the base, the apex, the base, the apex, right? And then we have the arc of the aorta over here, then we have the pulmonary trunk, then we have the vena cava system, and then we have the veins. Now let's see in this diagram that we already know. I told you we have the base, we have the apex, right? We have the apex, then we have the arc of aorta, right? And then we have the pulmonary trunk, and we have what? It was one over here, two over here, 3 and 4. It's a 5 and 6. So 5 5 was is over here, that is our Vena Cava, and 6 is over here, right? As 6. Now let's also know what are the other labeled structures over here, right? We discussed something about the atrioventricular groove, which is in the anterior part of the heart, right? That lies over here, that lies over here, right? So this is the anterior interventricular groove. I'm sorry, not atrioventricular groove, anterior interventricular groove, right? This is the first groove. You have a similar posterior interventricular groove over here. You can see some part of it over here. Now this is the posterior part of the image, and this is the anterior image which shows the anterior part. Now there's another groove that is called the coronary sulcus. It runs over here, right? It runs over here, right? Now there are three vessels that leave the arc of aorta, that is the brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid artery, and the left subclavian artery, right? And after we have the pulmonary trunk, we have left pulmonary artery and a similar right pulmonary artery leaving from here, and we've got the great cardiac vein in the anterior interventricular groove, and then we have the anterior interventricular artery, right? And in the coronary sulcus we have the right coronary artery. So let's also learn something which is called the chambers of the heart. Very basic thing which we have been learning from our 8th grade. But externally, how do you see, right? If you go back to the previous image, let me clean it a bit. Right, see over here, this part and this part, both of them are ventricles, right? Part over here and here, they are our auricles, right? The ventricles and the auricles. Now let's go back here. In this picture we can clearly see that in an image, the major part of the heart that we see, right? The major part of the heart that we see over here is just what? The ventricles. So where are the atriums? Where? Now you need to understand that the atriums are located just below the structures called as auricles. So let's say we have a flap like structure, auricle, and the structure internally which lies over here, over here, right? This structure is called as the atrium, and you must remember that it's inside the heart, so it's not an external structure, it's an internal structure. Now some textbooks refer to these flaps. I'm speaking about these flaps as atriums, but I prefer calling them auricles because atriums and auricles are two separate things, though they are connected. Auricles are just pouches of blood, they are just pouches which have blood and they have got the pectinate muscles in them. But okay, let's speak about it in sequence a bit later when we open up the heart, right? So yes, major part. So at this level we need to understand that major part of the heart is made up of ventricles, and auricles are seen over here, and over here, and atriums just lie within these auricles or just below these auricles. You can see this part over here, right? We will discuss more about it when we open up the heart. Now, before understanding anything else, we need to understand that there is another thing which is called the mediastinum. Now, mediastinum is a space. What is it? It's a space which lies over here. Over here. Now, let's say we've got lungs, right? Two lungs. Mediastinum is the space between them, right? Now this mediastinum is let's look at this image over here. This mediastinum has a superior part, an anterior part, a middle part, and a posterior part, right? This is a cross section which has ribs over here. This is the diaphragm. Now this is the superior mediastinum. This is the level of sternal angle. Above the sternal angle you've got superior mediastinum, right? Over here, a small part over here, you can see it over here, it's anterior mediastinum. Now this is middle mediastinum, and this part is the posterior mediastinum, right? So our heart is in the mediastinum. You can see that this white structure over here is pericardium. Right? Pericardium is the covering of heart, and this pericardium attaches this heart to the diaphragm. Now this is our diaphragm, right? So this is our pericardium, and these are the lungs held open so that we see the heart clearly. So what we know, our heart is present in the mediastinum, right? The heart is present in the mediastinum, and the mediastinum has four parts, that is superior mediastinum, anterior mediastinum, middle mediastinum, and posterior mediastinum. Now some textbooks may have some other parts like inferior mediastinum and stuff, but it is just like let's say I have an empty space, right? Technically I can divide this space to be anterior part, right, the posterior part, I mean the superior part, the inferior part over here, let's say this is superior, this is inferior. Now I can at the same time have an anterior, right, an anterior, and something which is posterior, right? So this is how I want you to understand that mediastinum is divided. Now let's directly go into the next part, that is what happens when we open the chambers of the heart. So I want you to understand that there are four chambers of the heart. There are two ventricles and two atriums, and I want you to understand the structures that they have in them, right? So now this is the part of the video where we are discussing the right side of the heart. Which side? the right side of the heart. Right now, you've got the right atrium opened over here, atrium, and you've got the right ventricle open in this image, ventricle. Now in the atrium, what I want you to understand is that we've got these muscles over here, right? Now these muscles are called as pectinate muscles. Which muscles? Pectinate muscles. Now pectinate muscles are not found in the atrium, they are found in the auricle. So this flap is a cutout portion of the auricle over here, right? Auricle. And in the atrium, you must remember that always the walls of atrium are rather smooth. Over here the walls are rather smooth. Now what are the other things that you can find in the atrium, right? So in the atrium you can find that in the right atrium we have got the superior vena cava opening in, the inferior vena cava opening in, and you've got the fossa ovalis, then you've got the orifice of the coronary sinus that is over here. So these structures are main in the right atrium. But when you see the ventricles, it's rather complex. This part is the ventricle, right? This part over here is our ventricle. Let's see what structures we can find. So see, this is the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve, I mean, like we have the structure, right? There's cusp number 1, cusp number 2, and cusp number 3, and you've got separate fibers that are over here, 1, 2, and 3. So there are fibers, the caudate tendinae, that are attached to these cusps. Now these fibers, let's look at them over here. Let's look at them over here. Then you have this papillary muscles. There are papillary muscles. Now these papillary muscles have something called as the Purkinje fibers in them. Now these Purkinje fibers get attached to this caudate tendinae, and this is how we see the ventricle. Right from the right ventricle we've got the pulmonary trunk, which leaves them. And what I want you to notice is the structure of the semilunar valve. The semilunar valve, let me clear everything. The semilunar valve, let's say we've got a pipe over here. This pipe is, we are looking at this structure. Right now we've got something similar to this, right? Something similar to this. Now how do we call it as a semilunar valve? Let's understand this thing. Let's say I open up this cylinder. This is the thickness of the vessel, right? This is the thickness of the vessel. Now this is a vessel that I opened up. Now I cut it over here and I open this up, right? So the semilunar, what does semilunar mean? Lunar means related to moon, right? And I think everybody knows that our moon, most of the times it has a crescent shape like this, right? So does our valves have. This is the thickness of the vessel, and this is the vessel that I am looking at, right? So our valves, the semilunar valves, have a structure. It's like this. Right, so they have a structure like this. So this is the concept behind the semilunar valves. They are 3 in number. Now let's come back to the left side of the heart. Now we are looking at the left side of the heart, and we are opening the chambers of the left side. Now in this image, now this is a section through the left atrium and the ventricle with there is no valve over here. This valve is seen over here, right? So now let's not confuse ourselves and just look at the chambers, not at the valve. So this chamber over here is the left ventricle. You can see the left ventricle over here too, so we will compare them. Now what I want you to see here is that the thickness, okay, let me clear things. The thickness of the wall, right? The thickness of the wall. If you notice, the wall over here is quite thick, right? And this has to be the apex of the heart. They are the papillary muscles over here, and this is the septum, interventricular septum, which is towards the ventricle of the other side. And there is something called as trabecular carnea. Right now, see, we have got the wall, right? In this wall, what I want you to understand is that we've got papillary muscles. This is the muscle, right? And these muscles have some projections over here. They have got projections. Now this projection over here, if I give a lining outline for this, right? Now this is called as the trabecular carnea over here. And now there are the Purkinje fibers, that is the nerve fibers coming out over here, and they indeed continue to be as the chordae tendineae, and they attach to a muscular flap of the wall. I think you understand, right? So we see that thing over here. We have the muscle. This muscle has a protrusion, and it's called as the trabecular carnea. Now this trabecular carnea has got these fibers, and now these are the chordae tendineae, right? Now as I told you, this part, this is a mitral valve. Mitral or bicuspid means two cusps, right? So how many cusps are visible? I mean, how many locations can you see where you are able to find the localization of chordae tendineae? That's location number 1 and location number 2, right? So this is the way. Now what else can you see? In the left atrium, the walls are quite smooth. Now the foramen valve that we saw on the other side has also a small valve which is closed, right? Then you've got the pulmonary veins entering. Now there are four pulmonary veins, 4 in number, right? 2 over here, 2 over here. And then you have the left auricle, as we had the right auricle. And yes, this is all. You need to understand that this part over here, we have the aorta coming out from the other side. So we have come to an end of this video, and we got to know that there are, let's summarize. We got to know that there are 6 parts that we need to know. The base of the heart, right? The apex of the heart. Where is the aorta? Where is the pulmonary trunk, right? And then where is the vena cava? And then where are the pulmonary veins? Right. This was what we talked about, and then we got to know that we have something called as mediastinum, right? Let's say we've got our trachea bifurcates as bronchi, and then we've got our lungs over here, right? So this part in between over here is called our mediastinum, and somehow we have our heart located over here, right? I think I've made myself clear. Now after this, we got to know that in our we have got two kinds of muscles in our heart. Muscles, muscles, right? We've got two kinds of muscles. We've got pectinate in the auricles, and we've got papillary in the ventricles. Do not mix with them, right? We've got papillary in the ventricles. Now after this, one last thing that you need to know is in the right atrium, what comes in is the vena cava. We have superior, inferior vena cava, and the opening of the coronary sinus. That's the venous drainage of the heart, right? In the right ventricle, what exits is called as the pulmonary trunk that further goes to the lungs, right? Then when we speak about the left atrium, we've got 4 pulmonary veins coming in, right? And these pulmonary veins then go into the the blood from these pulmonary veins goes into the left ventricle, and it's pumped out into the aorta, right, which brings blood to all of our body. I think you've understood everything, so I hope you all enjoyed this video and enjoyed learning the anatomy of the heart with MedGRADiENT. I sincerely thank you for watching.